You won't believe what happened when the most entitled HOA Karen in town marched onto a humble farmer's land waving fake documents, only to discover that her arrogance was about to sink her deeper than she could have ever imagined. In a quiet rural town in the heart of California, a hard-working farmer named Daniel Dan Lopez had spent his entire life cultivating his fields, protecting his land, and serving his community with honesty and dignity. His farm was more than just soil and crops. It was his family's heritage, passed down through generations, a place where neighbors gathered for fresh produce, Sunday markets, and honest conversation. But trouble arrived one hot summer afternoon when Karen, the self-proclaimed enforcer of her HOA, showed up with two of her smug companions. Karen was notorious for bullying her neighbors, misusing rules, and fabricating authority to control others. But this time she had crossed the line. She strode onto Dan's land with a stack of forged HOA notices, loudly declaring that his fields were no longer his, that the land had been reassigned for a new community project, and that he had no choice but to vacate immediately. Her shrill voice carried across the farm, drawing curious neighbors out of their homes. Dan took the papers calmly, scanning them with experienced eyes, and in just a few seconds he saw the sloppy errors, fake signatures, mismatched fonts, and a bogus HOA seal that anyone could spot as fraudulent. The crowd of neighbors whispered among themselves, sensing something wasn't right, but Karen, blinded by her arrogance, waved her hand dismissively and told them to shut up. "This is official," she barked, glaring at Dan, "and you're trespassing on what's now community property." Dan didn't raise his voice. He simply smiled and said, "If this is your land, Karen, then by all means, walk through it." She smirked, thinking he had surrendered, and signaled to her two companions to follow her deeper into the farmland. What Karen didn't realize was that Dan, being both clever and environmentally conscious, had recently reinforced a natural, low-lying patch of his field where rainwater collected after storms. He had built it into a retention area, a swampy wetland designed to conserve water, protect the soil, and give nature a place to thrive. To the untrained eye, it looked like soft grass and fertile land, but beneath the surface it was a deceptively sticky mire that could trap anyone foolish enough to walk through carelessly. Karen strutted forward confidently, her expensive shoes crunching on the soil, her fake papers still in hand, while her companions laughed and jeered, mocking Dan and the watching neighbors. But then, just a few steps in, the ground beneath Karen's feet shifted. Her smug smile faltered as her heel sank, then her whole foot, then her leg. "What the?" she shrieked, flailing as the soft earth pulled her downward. Her companions tried to rush to her aid, only to find themselves sinking too, their laughter replaced with panic as the sticky earth tightened its grip. The neighbors gasped, then some burst into laughter, pulling out their phones to record the spectacle. Karen thrashed and screamed, mud splattering onto her pristine blouse and cream pants, her face red with rage and humiliation. Dan stood calmly at the edge, arms crossed, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "The land has a way of knowing who belongs here and who doesn't." Karen screeched back, "This is illegal! Get me out of here right now or I'll sue you!" But the more she struggled, the deeper the swampy ground sucked her in. Her companions were already waist-deep, their designer clothes ruined, their dignity dissolving in the muck. Dan finally threw a rope toward them, but not before letting the humiliation sink in, literally. The crowd of neighbors cheered as Karen clung to the rope, her hair disheveled, her shoes lost, her body covered in mud. She was pulled out, coughing, screaming, and spitting in rage, while her forged papers floated uselessly in the swampy water behind her. Everyone had seen the truth, everyone had heard her lies, and everyone had witnessed her arrogance get swallowed by the very land she tried to steal. But the story wasn't over, because what came next would take Karen's humiliation to a level she never expected. If you thought Karen's embarrassment ended with her being dragged out of that swamp, think again. Because the farmer wasn't done, the sheriff was about to get involved, and Karen's downfall was only beginning. Word of the incident spread like wildfire across the small town. By the time the sheriff's patrol vehicle rolled onto Dan's driveway, dozens of neighbors were already gathered, some still laughing, others streaming the scene live on their phones. Sheriff Daniels, a tall, weathered man with a no-nonsense expression, stepped out of his SUV and demanded to see the so-called HOA notices Karen had been waving around. Dripping with mud, her hair plastered to her face, Karen stomped forward and shoved the soggy papers at him, ranting about trespassing, illegal farms, and how she would have Dan arrested. Daniels flipped through the documents, his frown deepening with every page. Then he looked up at Dan, who calmly produced the official land deeds and water conservation permits that proved not only that the farm belonged to him, but also that his Swampy water retention project had been approved by county environmental authorities. Daniels turned back to Karen, shaking his head in disbelief. "These papers are fake," he said flatly, holding up the dripping HOA notices for everyone to see. Gasps and laughter rippled through the crowd. Karen's face turned crimson as Daniels continued, "Forgery, harassment, trespassing. You've dug yourself into a real pit here." Neighbors clapped and jeered, some chanting, "Instant karma," as Karen tried to argue. But her words were drowned out by the chorus of laughter. Her companions, still covered in mud, tried to slip away quietly, but Daniels stopped them in their tracks, ordering them to stay put while deputies arrived. The situation escalated when a local news van pulled up, reporters eager to cover what was quickly becoming the most entertaining scandal in town. Cameras zoomed in on Karen, mud dripping from her blouse, her hands trembling as she tried to wipe her face, while Dan stood beside the sheriff, calm and collected, explaining how he had turned part of his land into a water-saving wetland to help the environment. "She tried to steal this land," Dan said simply, holding up the real deeds. "But nature itself made sure she couldn't." The crowd erupted in applause. Karen shrieked that this was all a setup, that she was the victim, but no one listened anymore. Her reputation had been shattered, her lies exposed, and her power gone. Deputies escorted her and her companions away as the cameras rolled, capturing every humiliating detail. Within hours, the video went viral online. HOA Karen sinks in swamp after fake land grab, drawing millions of views and endless comments mocking her downfall. For Dan, it was vindication. Not only had he protected his family's land, but his water-saving project gained new recognition, with county officials praising him for his environmental efforts. He became a local hero, while Karen became a laughingstock, her name forever tied to the swamp that swallowed her arrogance. And as neighbors continued to share the story, one lesson echoed through the community. Don't mess with a farmer who knows his land, because the earth has a way of serving instant karma that no HOA rule or fake document could ever prevent.